Hey everybody, Brian Zane here. Well, I just got back home from my big weekend tour with Ring of Honor in Baltimore and Philadelphia. Had a great time this weekend. A vlog on that is forthcoming in the next few days in the channel. But before the jet lag completely consumes my being, I do want to give you my thoughts on TLC 2019. I watched the show on the plane ride back home, so I'm going to give you my thoughts on this event. Beginning with the pre-show match, as Andrade takes on Humberto Carrillo in a rematch from last week on Raw. Slower paced match at the onset than what we're used to seeing from these guys, but the excitement does pick up near the end. And like Andrade's got answers for everything Humberto's dishing out for the bulk of the match. My favorite spot of this matchup, the biggest one at least, is a wild double stomp from Andrade to Humberto to the outside. Pretty crazy. Andrade at one point near the end gets busted up around his eye. Carrillo hits a poison rana followed by a big old moonsault to win in emphatic fashion. So two big wins in a row for Carrillo here. I give the match 3 stars out of 5. Like I said, the match really improved in excitement as time went on. I appreciated there were a couple little callbacks to their last match on Raw, where you see this time where Andrade almost collides with Zelina Vega on the apron. You saw after the match there seemed to be some tension between Andrade and Zelina. Some cracks in the armor appeared to be forming. It looked like they might be teasing a breakup of some kind, but as we saw the next night on Raw in the Gauntlet match, that seems not to be followed up on at this point. They're continuing the drama between Andrade and Humberto. That rivalry is clearly not done yet. So if there is any tension, or if they're booking any tension between Andrade and his business associate, then maybe that's on the back burner for now. The show officially begins with a ladder match with the Smackdown tag team titles as the New Day defend against the Revival. Credit to Dash for not tripping on the entrance this time. Early on, Kofi with a great evasion of a ladder attack only to walk right into another one. He does it again and then dives into the ladder onto the Revival chest first. Why? That seems so counterproductive. Big E climbs at one point, gets hit with a missile dropkick by Dawson, and Big E's leg appears to be caught in the ladder, which was pretty painful. Incredible counter by Kofi near the end, where he's on the ladder, he gets pushed off, but he lands on the top rope, jumps off, and hits a tornado DDT, which was phenomenal. Even if the landing for that move itself wasn't like 100% spot on, I give all the credit in the world to Kofi for pulling that off, because a lesser man would have botched that from the onset. Superplex onto Big E onto a ladder bridge, followed up with a splash by Wilder, but then Big E comes back to hit the big ending on Dash off another ladder. The match ends when Kofi hits Dawson with the bells. Scott goes flying. Kofi grabs the championships and wins for the New Day. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. This was a fun ladder match. If you know these guys and the athleticism they can bring to any kind of match environment, you knew what you were getting into here. Some of the spots in this one were a bit harder to watch than others, and whether that was intentional or not, who's to say. I also enjoyed the creative finish here. It was, like I said, a good match to start the show officially, but like I've said before, in the last time I reviewed the Smackdown, let's just see some new tag teams, okay? Let's see some new teams challenging the New Day. Backstage, King Corbin's being interviewed and says he's already in Roman's head mentally, and now he's going to beat him physically tonight. After weeks of tension over a simple knocking on the door, we finally have our match between Aleister Black and Buddy Murphy. Of course, this match takes place right after a recap of Andrade and Zelina Vega. I mean, come on, guys. You're not even trying at this point. Either that or you are trying really hard. A cool moment where they both do the crisscross applesauce with each other as the match begins. I don't know how I feel about Aleister Black's trunks here, because it just looks like a big black blob on his ass with no shape to it. Buddy driving Aleister's face into the corner post shell into the steps. His nose gets busted pretty early in the match here. Buddy tries to put on Aleister's vest, then when Black gets up, Buddy just throws it out of the ring toward him, hits Jerry Lawler in the face. He gets a nice Jerry chant too. Big comeback by Black here. Bud Murph with many kicks to Aleister's trapped head, big knees, back fists, various strikes. This match is very different from anything else you'll see on this show because of how strike heavy both these guys are here. Great exchange near the end, Black hitting Black Mass out of nowhere to win the thing. I give it 4 stars out of 5. This is probably the best match of the night in my opinion. I think these guys are just so good, and like I said, completely different to everything else you see on Raw right now. They bring a completely different vibe to what they present. I mean, I just want to see them on TV more. Maybe not against each other all the time, but just let's see some more of these guys in action, see more on TV. The build to this, you've seen some more of them on television. Let's see some more work with them after the fact. Rusev's being interviewed backstage. He's keeping up his new tradition of wearing awesome t-shirts. He says he's elated that Lana wants to marry Bobby Lashley because then he won't have to pay alimony anymore, and he says that the only thing Lana's going to be doing with her time after this is picking the splinters out of Bobby's back. The Viking Raiders get a lovely reception in, I guess, their adopted home territory of Minnesota, where the Vikings play in the NFL, so nice reception for them. They issue an open challenge for the Raw Tag Team Championships, and the OC, Anderson and Gallows, answer the call. It's an okay match, but really the big takeaway with this whole thing is that it's a sponsored piece for KFC, because every 10 seconds it keeps cutting back to these 4 fans, I guess, they're plants, who are sitting at ringside watching the match with their big buckets of KFC, and this one dude's really into eating the chicken every time we cut back to him. He's really all about that chicken. Near the end of the match, Ivar does a back spring, a back elbow, misses Gallows, who sells anyway. Viking experience to Anderson. Gallows is late in breaking it up before the 3, but the 3 count does not happen anyway. Weak. Match then ends in a double count out. Super weak. The fight continues. They bring in the KFC table. Gets a mild KFC chant, which I guess that alone is worth the money that KFC spent to get this match sponsored. Powerbomb onto Anderson through the table, and that's pretty much that. I give it 1 star out of 5. It's a pretty meh match with a couple of botches near the end, and of course a double countout finish, and no one enjoys that sort of thing. This whole match was just done for the glory of KFC. They would have a much longer match the next night on Raw, but this is not really worth putting on pay-per-view. Pass on this one. The Miz is being interviewed backstage. He says his family's been moved to an undisclosed location, which is a very natural thing to say. He says this is the most important match of his life. He's fighting for his family. Well, after weeks of dog-related humor on Smackdown, including being slopped with dog food, Roman Reigns looks to get his revenge against King Corbin tonight in a TLC matchup. The match starts off with a brawl as Roman starts beating up some of the guys who are carrying Corbin's sedan, including one poor guy who had a rough table spot. Corbin gets the advantage on the outside and works Roman over with some chair shots before Reigns makes his comeback. Some big Roman chants here in this match here. Roman grabs the table, but he gets dinged in the head with a full can of dog food, a choke slam, and a kick out. They're setting up a move on the announce table. Roman hits a Samoan drop through the other table. Roman runs toward Corbin, but then Dolph Ziggler pops up from under the ring and super kicks Reigns. The baddies then beat up the timekeeper for whatever reason, then threaten to slop him with dog food when Reigns is back on the attack. More Corbin security run-ins. Roman bops them. Graves with the great line telling them not to lead with their abdomen. The Revival then show up and beat down Roman. Roman takes them out and dives onto all the heels. Reigns signals for the spear when a chair from Ziggler flies into Roman's face from out of frame. That shot looked hilarious. A zigzag. Side note, how can the guy who's supposed to be the locker room leader in this company have no friends to help him out? We do get some Uso chants near the end of this when the beatdown is happening, but we're not seeing those guys. The match ends when there's a shatter machine. End of days on the chair. Corbin wins after half the roster helps him out. I give the match 3 stars out of 5. I was thinking a lot between that and 2.5. I went with 3 because I think, it's a match and a feud I don't really care about, but the match itself was okay. I think for a weapons match, they hit all their marks. Everything looked good and crisp, so I had no problem with the delivery of the match itself. Just, the feud is and I'm not really mad about how the match ended. I think it does a great job making Corbin look like a huge piece of shit. He's got to have all these people, this whole army on his side to even come close to beating Roman Reigns, and makes Roman looks like $1,000,000. Even in defeat, he had to fight off a dozen dudes in order to win. As Vince Russo might have said, bro, he looked like King Kong, bro. So I'm not really mad at how the finish happened, if I'm being honest. I just really don't care about this feud, and based on the result here and what we see later in this show, we're gonna get more feud between the big dog and the king. Oh boy. The Miz takes on Bray Wyatt in what's inexplicably a non-title match in this situation. I believe it's Bray's first match as himself all year, or at the very least, it's the very first match he's had as the kids show host version, the Firefly Funhouse version of Bray Wyatt. His non-Fiend entrance is pretty interesting. It's the whole version of the Firefly Funhouse theme. He's all smiles. Gets actually a really big reception from the crowd. The crowd loves this whole character here. My question is, why is The Miz just standing there while he's doing his pose and everything? I know they want to get the whole entrance out of their system, but The Miz is he's fighting for his family. This is a really emotional feud. All of a sudden, he's just standing there waiting for him to do his thing. Now, granted, once the bell rings, he's all business. He starts fighting right away at Bray. He just starts off swinging, beating Bray up, and Bray is kind of a combination of begging him off, but also laughing through all the beatdowns and stuff. At one point, Miz tries to dislocate the shoulder, and then Bray runs himself into the barricade to pop it back into place. Bray finally goes for Sister Abigail Abigail, but then Miz counters in the skull-crushing finale. Bray laughs it off. Finally, there's a Sister Abigail on the floor, and Miz barely avoids the count-out, but then walks right into another one for Bray to win the match, and that's pretty much it. Bray gave Rollin no offense except for a couple of Sister Abigail attempts, and that was it. After the match, an image of the Fiend appears on the big screen, and Bray is very excited to see him. He says, okay, I'll do it. And so he goes under the ring, pulls out the big cartoon mallet that we first saw in person at Hell in a Cell earlier this year. Big let him in chance as well. This crowd is very pro Bray Wyatt, even though he's clearly the bad guy in this situation. Like, he's the one terrorizing Miz's family. They love it. They love family terrorizing, it turns out. So before he does anything, though, the lights start cutting out, like the beginning of the Fiend run in, and Bray's excited again. But instead, it's a kind of a distraction. It's a ruse. All of a sudden, a flying knee to the face hits Bray, and it's Daniel Bryan, who has now shaved his head and his beard, so now he looks like the American Dragon of old. The man just does not age. It's insane. So Daniel beats up Bray some more, hits him with another flying knee, goes to hit him with the mallet, but then Bray disappears after the lights cut out. I give this whole segment 3.5 stars. Now, as a match between Miz and Bray, it was shit. Not much to it. It tells the story of Bray being this kind of like, he's immune to pain. He's blocked out pain, like he explained in Firefly Funhouse. So we're seeing some of that, and we're seeing he can still be sadistic if he wants to be. And, you know, kudos to The Miz for the whole noble fighting for his family thing, even though I think he kind of like, he pumped the brakes a little too early on by not attacking Bray from the get-go there. I think the story they told afterward is very interesting, but I don't think it's flawless. Like, I think I have questions about that, because, like, okay, so is the Fiend, like, I'm just confused. Just like, first of all, aesthetically speaking, why couldn't it be a video of the Fiend, like a moving picture, not just this still image from like a month's old vignette with the Fiend? Something to see, like maybe him talking to Bray. That would be interesting to see. Like, what is exactly the nature of the Fiend's character in relation to Bray Wyatt? Bray Wyatt, I thought, as the kids' host, was the pacifist, so why is he even acting the way he is here, where he's got kind of like the dichotomy of his personality? There's a lot of explanation left to do with this, and I'm not going to try and poo-poo on this. I'm still going to give them the benefit of the doubt and see where this goes. There are questions. I'm not saying this is not a flawless story they're telling here, but it's interesting. I'm curious to see where they go with this. I want to know what happens with Bray and Daniel Bryan going forth. There's a lot of questions left to be asked here, and I'm still kind of holding out hope that this is going to end in, you know, something that makes sense and is fun to watch. It's time for the tables match between Rusev and Bobby Lashley. Before the match, we get this cheesy TMZ-style vignette that shows the story so far. Last time they did something like that was for the Rusev, Lana, Summer Rae, Dolph Ziggler storyline. You know what? Sometimes time's a flat circle. The fists are flying at the onset. Lana distracts Rusev early on. A couple of close calls with table spots between both guys. Lashley setting up a lot of tables, but it's costing him time against Rusev. They fight on the apron with the table beneath them and a table behind them. Lashley gets knocked off the apron, but he clears the table on the floor. Very nice jump. Rusev beats up Lashley with a guardrail, but he gets slammed through it. Lashley beats the heck out of Rusev with a kendo stick until Rusev fights back with it. Lana jumps on Rusev's back. Lashley goes for the spear, but they don't go through the table. It does not break for them. So they recover, though, with Lashley suplexing Rusev through the other table to win. I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars out of 5. You know what? For a match with such personal animosity to it, I thought they would go more all out with the violence. I'm not saying like blood or anything, but more just like aggression, more passion, more emotion. We didn't really get that one. It didn't really match the vibe of the story they've been telling here. I feel we got some bursts of it, some moments of brilliance, but besides that, though, I think it was just another kind of like, oh, it's a weapons match. Okay, so we got to get this spot here and that spot. Tough break for Rusev losing here, but I'm sure he's going to interfere in the wedding a few weeks from now. I'm sure someone's going to go in some cake. Lana's going to scream. You know how it is. The Street Profits are backstage. Angelo Dawkins tells Lashley to get a vasectomy. They're cut off, though, by a big backstage brawl between Roman Reigns, King Corbin, Dolph Ziggler, The New Day, Shorty G, I think, is there, Buddy Murphy, probably more. The Profits join in, and it's crazy times. In your main event, the TLC match for the Women's Tag Team Championships as Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch challenge the Kabuki Warriors. Before I even get into the match, though, what a crazy year it has been for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Like, they debut in February to a lot of fanfare and a lot of hope. Sasha Banks and Bayley are the first champions. And then at WrestleMania, you know, the Iconics win the belt, and people are very upset about that because, oh, they're not good enough wrestlers to be champions, whatever that means. And look, I don't think their reign was any good. I think a lot of it had to do with how they were presented represented. Like, you can have a chicken shit heel championship reign, but if they're not on television and not even defend the belts, like, then what's even the point? They had it for this long time and they did nothing with them, which I think that's the real problem. Not so much the talent that had the belts, but how they were booked. And so then when Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss won the belts, like, that was an interesting combination. I felt they could have played more on that partnership. I think it was like too early in the partnership for that to make sense for me, but I think they could have built more on the relationship. And then when the Kabuki Warriors won the belts, I think that was long overdue. I think two women who, you know, had a rough start in the main roster, and now they're kind of like, they're finally redeemed, having the championships and getting a chance to have good defenses with them. Like, now they're finally at the point where I think the women's belts are getting the kind of attention they deserve. And now they're in the main event of the last pay-per-view of the year. So crazy year that those belts have had, for sure. At the start of the match, Becky and Charlotte beat the hell out of Kairi for a long time while Asuka's down. Asuka's finally back and she's throwing a chair around. They give Charlotte and Becky what for. Kairi begins throwing chairs into the ring, some of them at least. She hides under the ring, and then when the challengers pull her out, she sprays them with a fire extinguisher, which I love that spot. Asuka produces a rope and starts whipping people with it. Kairi with a very unnecessary bump into the ladder while she throws Becky into some chairs. They trap Charlotte into an office chair and beat her up, and they tie Becky to a ladder with the rope. Very creative there. Samoa Joe with a great call, by the way, bringing up Kairi's sailing past after tying that knot. The Warriors take all day climbing the ladder before Charlotte makes the save, and here's a real pivotal point in the match here. Out on the outside, Charlotte hucks Kairi, who the announcers call Asuka on accident. It's kind of a 2-for-1 whammy here. She throws Kairi into the barricade, and you can see it looks like her head hits the floor pretty hard. Now, whether this is the spot that causes Kairi to be hurt for the rest of the match or not, it's not been definitive, but that seems to be the leading cause of it, and I'm inclined to agree. So yeah, after this point, it's a huge switch has been hit with Kairi, because she is just not at her usual high-performing self for the rest of the match, and it really brings down the rest of the contest. She is able to keep going somehow. She goes to the elbow drop, but then Becky puts up the boot and gets free. She and Charlotte make their fiery comeback. Becky with a leg drop to Asuka through the table. Kairi looks to be just suffering here. You know, she's like ragdolling as Charlotte and Becky are carrying her around the ringside area. She does get them both onto one table at one point. Looks to go for an elbow drop, and then there's this really awkward moment where like Charlotte gets off the table, Kairi like lands on her feet and just kind of like hits Becky on the way down. This big clattering noise. I'm not sure what that was. But yeah, that didn't look like it went the way it was supposed to. Then on the outside, Charlotte spears Kairi, and that looks terrible. We get a slap in the face, and then Charlotte powerbomb, a really shitty looking powerbomb on Kairi. She does not want to go up. Either she doesn't want to, or she can't get up for the powerbomb. And then finally, she goes to the table. This is just rough to watch. She is clearly hurt. Asuka takes Charlotte down and buries her in plunder. She and Kairi set up the ladder. Lynch and Flair come back with chairs, but at this point, Kairi wants none of it. Charlotte goes for a moonsault to the outside, but Asuka stops her, powerbombs her through the table on the floor, and the table does not break Charlotte's fall or slow her down in the least. Becky whips Asuka with the rope, goes to climb the ladder, but then Asuka pulls the rope to make the ladder fall. Very creative cutoff there. Asuka climbs the ladder, grabs the titles, and mercifully, this match is over. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I think it's the highest I can possibly rate this thing. This was a match that got harder to watch with each passing minute. And I don't know like when they knew that Kairi was hurt, or if they knew, or if even Kairi herself knew that she was banged up. It's really hard to tell. But this was a match that was just it got sloppier as time went on. Even if Kairi wasn't hurt, I think you could have cut 10 minutes out of this match, and it would have been a stronger match as well. These ladies are all good workers, but for whatever reason, when you put them in the main event, especially if weapons get involved, things get really ropey. That's like the one thing I've noticed this year, is that for all these main event matches like Becky Lynch has been in and Charlotte has been in, it's just like something doesn't connect, something doesn't click when they're in the main event. And I don't know if it's a pressure thing or they're being asked to do too much, or what, because like, you know, I think they're better than this. We've seen them have great matches before, but sometimes in the clutch, something doesn't go right. And by the way, I don't blame Charlotte. I'm not going to attack her for what happened to Kairi. I don't think it's her fault. I think that what happened to Kairi on the way down, that was a freak accident. That could have happened to anybody, from anybody's move. So I'm not mad at Charlotte for that. It's just one of those things where it's like, I would hope at some point they realize that Kairi was hurt. There's footage of Becky like trying to protect Kairi Kyrie on a couple of occasions, like rolling her under the ring after the match was like wrapping up, better late than never, I guess. But, it was hard to watch. I think a lot of it had to do with Kyrie's performance, but also I just believe the match was just too long. Anyway, we get no time to really process what happened here, because as soon as they announced the Kabuki Warriors won the match, we immediately cut to elsewhere in the arena, where the big brawl with the guys is still ongoing, and now it's expanded. Now pretty much the whole locker room's involved here with this big brawl. It ends when Corbin is speared off a platform onto the rest of the guys, like stage dive style, to end the show. And so that segment there, that ending, I know drew a lot of criticism from fans, because people were mad that, Asuka didn't get her moment. That's happened a lot, unfortunately, for Asuka. It's like every time she has a big win, something overshadows it, and this is another example of that happening. Like, they wanted the Kabuki Warriors to stand tall at the end and have their moment. And I understand that, but there's a couple things. First of all, I don't think Kyrie was going to be able to stand, period, much less stand tall at the end of that match up there. Second of all, how often do we criticize the product for being stale and, oh, everything's the same, it's recycled? Like, how many shows have ended with the champion standing tall at the end of a match? Whether it's the Kabuki Warriors or not, there's somebody, whoever's in the main event, stands tall at the end, that's how the show ends. Whoop-de-doo. This is actually something different. It's something interesting. It's something just, it breaks from the norm. And isn't that what we want? Don't we want things to not be so predictable and just kind of like, it's the same formula every time? This actually breaks the formula a little bit. And yes, I agree that, Asuka probably could have had more time to really soak in the victory. She's still doing that to an extent with the live crowd. And, and I agree that I think Asuka's really had a run of bad luck with that. I think a lot of that's more coincidence than anything. But yeah, I think that this ending didn't bother me. I think it was cool. Like I've said before, I like closing brawls. I like shows ending in a wild, big kerfuffle where you don't know, there's no resolution to it. And so if a pay-per-view ends that way, cool. I think that's fine too. I think it's different. It's different than the champion standing tall corner logo. We've seen that a million times. Let's change things up a little bit before the year is over. My final grade for TLC 2019 is a C-. This show did have some nuggets of goodness throughout, but I think it was largely uninteresting. I think that, if you're not going to defend titles often on television, you should defend them on pay-per-view. And the fact that you had like no singles championships on the line on this pay-per-view, I thought was very disappointing. I felt that some of the matches, especially like, Miz and Bryan and the Lashley Rusev match, I felt those matches really underdelivered in terms of a emotion standpoint, in an aggression standpoint, because these are very deeply rooted personal vendettas these guys are going on here, and I just felt that the action or lack thereof didn't really match that. And then of course there is the pay-per-view, there's the main event for the pay-per-view, which was a bit clunky at times. It was awkward, someone got hurt, that's never fun, and you could just see it affect the rest of the match. And as far as things I enjoyed about the show, I think that the ladder match was great, Black and Murphy was a great match, probably the best one of the whole show. Daniel Bryan's return's interesting. The story they're telling with Daniel Bryan and Bray Wyatt, I'm very curious about. I don't care for Reigns and Corbin as a feud, but the brawl was still fun to watch, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. So there's a couple of good things I'm interested in about this show that make me curious what the next couple weeks will bring, next couple months will bring. But besides that, those two major takeaways, Daniel Bryan and Bray Wyatt and the Reigns and Corbin, not much else about the show to speak of. But let me know what you thought about TLC in the comments section below, and be sure to give it a letter grade by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.